Councillors, we might speak, and Councillor Plum, you lead us in prayer. Gentlemen, sorry, meeting a motion, please, to recommence the meeting. Councillor Arthur, Councillor Gleeson.
Okay.
All in favour, carried.
Almighty God, we acknowledge that we have a responsibility to look after your creation, especially this region we call Barcaldine Regional Council. We are also conscious that our decisions are going to affect deeply the lives, land and property of the people we have come here to serve. Remind us to exercise respect for each other, our fellow councillors, staff and the people of our region. Help us in this meeting to act wisely, justly and intelligently in all our deliberations. Thank you, Lord, for the privilege of both leading and serving, and assist us to do this well. Amen.
Amen. Councillors, I have a condolence, the passing of the late Francis Amelia, also known as Toddy Thompson of Barcaldine. Could I ask us to observe a minute's silence, please? Thank you. Take this opportunity on behalf of the Council to pay our respects to both the traditional owners and the custodians of the land upon which we meet and their elders, both past, present and emerging. There is no apologies technically because Councillor Peoples is participating in the meeting via technology, so all our present can be accounted for. We recording. Yeah, thank you. I now call for declarations, please, of prescribed conflicts of interest. I'm not going to go individually because it's such a small agenda. So, Councillor Plum, you have one.
I would like to inform the meeting that I have a prescribed conflict of interest in item 3.4.1, item 1.1 of the Planning and Development Report due to my employer, Elders Rural Services, is mentioned in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Plum. And you'll be dealing with this matter by leaving the meeting as the matter is discussed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do any other councillors have any other prescribed conflicts of interest of their own to declare?
Mr Mayor, do we have a confidential report or is that just a blank item in the agenda?
No, we don't.
No, that's right. No, I just...
It just stands as a standing agenda item if it's something that comes in the decimal point after that. There's a very small chance that it could have been, but it hasn't materialised.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Do any other councillors believe that any other councillor? Oh, Councillor Peoples, sorry.
Yes, can I, in item 3.4.3, I have a prescribed COI, same as the last few meetings, to the footpath in Porter Street. My home is in Porter Street, so I'll declare that as a prescribed COI, and I will leave this room while you discuss that report. Mr Mayor, you might be able to give me a call and I'll come back.
Thank you, Councillor Peoples. Just bear with us, please. Councillor Peoples, what we'll probably do in that respect, rather than you trying to leave the room and then us regain, we might we'll mute the Zoom so that there's no audio transmit from this end, and then when we recommence with agenda item 344, we'll unmute.
Yep.
And we'll probably ask you to turn your camera off. So we'll turn our microphone off and you'll kill your camera. It will be the easiest way to recommence the meeting.
Alright, I like you doing everything go around, I'm not sure about that.
Well, we'll try and do it for you, and if not, we'll walk you through how to do it.
Alright, thank you.
Or we'll put a sheet over our cameras, but no, we can't do that because the rest of us need to be on screen. So, all right. Do any councillors present wish to raise a potential prescribed conflict of interest for any other councillor in the meeting? I now call for declarations of declarable conflicts of interest, please. Councillor Gleeson.
Mr Mayor, I may have, with item 381 regarding
Are you a
the,
member of the Motorbike Campcraft Association?
I am not a member, but I will be competing at that event and quite possibly some other members of this will be as well. I don't believe.
The rules of that, you will know as being on the executive committee, to be precise, not even just a member of the committee, so you have no,
Thank you.
you have no connection to the executive of the Motorbike Committee, no?
Through Mr Mayor, I'd like to inform the meeting that I believe I have a declarable conflict of interest in matter 3.4.3 progress report. The nature of my interest is that, as defined by section 150 of the Local Government Act, the nature of my interest is that the sculpture trade is mentioned in the report. Due to it being a report, and I don't know whether their decision is going to be made, I suggest that I will stay in the room, but I acknowledge,
Unless you're opting to leave the protocol, it will.
I think it says, I acknowledge that the other councillors must now.
I move Councillor Rogers remains in the room. Seconder, Hanson, debate. None, those in favour? Carried. 6-0. Further declarable conflicts of interest? Do any councillors present wish to raise a potential DCOI for another councillor present? There being none, thank you very much, councillors. Now would like a resolution, please, to receive the minutes of the 21 April general meeting. Moved, councillor. Just receiving at this point. If you have an amendment, we'll do that after we receive them. Would you like a move to receive it?
No.
No. Councillor R. Councillor Hanson seconds. Do you wish to debate receiving them, Councillor Plum?
No, I want to make an amendment.
That's fine. Those in favour? Councillor Peoples, are you in favour? Thank you. 7-0. Right. Are there amendments, alterations, adjustments?
Mr Mayor, could I make an amendment to my conflict, my prescribed conflict of interest that my employee be changed from Elders Limited to Elders Rural Services? In the planning report, it's just got Elders, but it is actually the firm's name is Elders Rural Services, and that's why I I made a statement that it's Elders Rural Services in my prescribed interest today.
Do you believe that was what you did on the day? Would you have defined your employer as Elders Rural Services?
Yeah, it's a colours, Elders Rural Services doesn't exist only in South Australia.
Yeah, that's fine. Amendments to the minutes are not clarifications, they're only to alter the minutes if councillors believe they don't truly reflect what was said on the day. So if that's what you believe you said on the day, that's fine. I don't councillors have any problem with that. This following resolution will then read that the minutes of the general meeting of Blackwater Regional Council be confirmed with the stated amendments. Are there further? Can I have a mover for the resolution then? Councillor Peebles, can you see that resolution?
Yeah.
Can I have a mover for the resolution, please? Councillor Hanson, seconder. Councillor Gleeson. Debate. There being none, those in favour? Carried. You do have to vote in favour on that after you've asked the school amendment, Councillor Plum.
I'm just
Make a lot of cups of tea at morning tea if you don't. Do any councillors or officers have petitions that they need to be tabled at this time? Being none, we move to the reports. Somebody move that my report be received, please. Councillor Plum, second Councillor Hanson. Those in favour? You're in favour, Councillor Peebles?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
7-0. That is a rather brief report. There's substantially more activity happening within each of those visits here. They've been grouped together for the ease of reading and brevity. Considerable intelligence was gleaned at the LAWMAC meeting in Cairns that may help guide or place officers in connection with officers from other councils around procurement of services in that space. That is the waste collection space. I take it as read unless anyone has any questions. Will somebody move that the Council Information Correspondence Report be received, please? Councillor Plum, seconder. Councillor Hanson. Those in favour? Carried, 7-0. We'll deal with these individually. Councillors, I also received, a copy that's been placed in your pigeonhole since this correspondence, so you've got a double copy of it from the Grants Commission. I'm aware that there's been considerable chatter at a variety of forums over a long period of time now. Most recently, the Deputy Mayor informs me of considerable discussion regarding the federal assistant grant discussion at the Western Alliance Council's meeting in Richmond. I'm concerned that the chatter seems to be shifting towards changing the methodology of distribution rather than increasing the size of the pie. Which obviously is more money. I genuinely think that for the first time in a long time we've got a unique position where the federal government could come under pressure in the coming months. Maybe not to take it all the way to 1%, but to make a market increase. The federal conference of the National Labor Party recently resolved to incorporate a return of 1% of taxation revenue being returned to local government as part of their policy platform. That hasn't happened since FAGS was introduced from their side of politics. And the Deputy Mayor also informs me at the recent conference the federal local government minister said he'd be prepared to perhaps consider a move in that direction if there was uniformity of if there was support uniformly from local governments. I just don't believe that there's not. I can't believe that AMEA anywhere in Australia would not want more money, which is essentially what lifting the FAGS grant from 5.55% or in that order to 1% delivers. My concern about the change in the methodology is there are significantly more larger, medium to large councils in Queensland than there are councils of our size. If we push for a change, we're still receiving as a state the same amount of money, because the way that assistance grant works for the benefit of everybody is that the states are allocated a portion of money, and then the methodology for how it's distributed rests with each state's grants commission. So the federal government decides how much money for each state, and then each state decides how much or how the money is distributed to local government. That's very rudimentary, but essentially how it works. All right, officers? My concern with it is if we try to change that methodology, the bigger councils who to date have been, until COVID, like in the case of the really large councils, a little bit ambivalent because it's not a significant revenue stream for them. They get more money. In the case of Brisbane City Council, anecdotally, it is they receive more money in parking fines every year than they get from the FAGS grant. However, during COVID, as you're all aware, there were no parking fines because they shut down on them, and there were no parking fees, and all of a sudden every single revenue stream that every local government received took on a new meaning and a new importance. And the first to state that I think we genuinely need more money from that grant than the big city councils do, but I'm not going to fight them for it. I don't believe we as a local government out here should fight them for it. We should be fighting for a bigger share of the pie because their needs are different to ours. They have need for more money than us in some cases. I'm very concerned now that there's a move within certain circles of local government to ask for the distribution methodology to change, which is easy. We can dream up a methodology change that benefits us and costs councils from the Central Highlands size effectively up. Could cost them money. We can dream that up. We could even dream it up that it affects only the top 8 or 10, but the fact remains it will mean that we will divide local government across the state on that, and given that there are so few of us on the bottom end, we will lose. We've lost every time that fight's been fought previously. We're so close to getting, when you've got one side of politics this close to a federal election, committed to a rise, we should be aiming all of our resources at getting that through, because then we all win rather than picking winners and losers. So this review is now underway. That's a problem for me. I wished it didn't happen because that takes away. I mean, obviously, they state in there that it's been more than 10 years since it's happened, so perhaps it is meaningful. Some meaningful elements may fall out of this review, but it would be my broad assessment that the methodology is not at fault here. It's the amount of money, the dwindling amount of money in comparison to our skyrocketing expenses that is the problem. So when it comes time for our submission to this review, it's my assessment that broadly we should ask for the review, for the methodology to remain unchanged, and harness our resources into securing more money to be allocated. Anyway, we're not asking for a decision today, but I think it's a very important, probably one of the most important items on the agenda actually, given our future financial sustainability. Comments? Officers, did you want to add any comments? Councillors?
Only just to say that council does have to put a submission in. We'll have to, and we have to come up with what our proposal will be. I don't know how much effect it will have, but we definitely need to make sure we've got a submission into this review.
That submission could be that we're content with the current methodology. Like it need not be an involved alternative process. Councillors? Councillor Rogers, you attended that forum.
I believe that when we put the submission in, yeah, it could be the same methodology, but as long as we don't go backwards, basically. We could put in a submission for more, but I feel like I'm saying, as long as we don't have, we're always going to have a risk of getting less, but it just has to be really strongly reiterated that we can't accept any less.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Even within the Western Alliance of Councils, yes, I'll come to you, Councillor Peters, even within the Western Alliance of Councils, there's going to be disparities of methodology. When you have councils the size of Mount Isa and Maranoa versus councils the size of Diamantina and Barcoo, for example. Now, we're not by any means the smallest or the challenged the most financially within that group, but there will be a range. It's not even simple to say, well, the Western 21 can all get the same benefit here. It just physically doesn't happen that way. Councillor Peters?
That was my point too, Mr Mayor. What was, the ideas, and who was pushing this at the Western Alliance, what were their ideas on change? And probably before we put it in again, it'd be good to understand what the other Western Alliance had in mind.
So I'll ask Councillor Rogers to attend to the Western Alliance. However, I have had considered conversations with the chair of RAPID since the Western Alliance, and I've asked that we agenda this for a RAPID board meeting for RAPID councils who I feel are more relevant than the Western Alliance to our position on this, to discuss what our approach to the review might be at our next board meeting, so that if there's any common ground that our submissions could find, then the 6 or 7 submissions that we all send in will, if there's a common theme or a common element to them, they may vary in their overall intent, but if there is a common theme, well, that may resonate well with the Grants Commission. Councillor Rogers, do you want to add to the comments?
Mr Mayor, the Minister basically, he said that every council has to be in agreement with the 1% rise, and basically I don't think he believed that every council was. If we all get our ducks in a row and we definitely all want that rise, he's more inclined to look at that in a positive way. But the review, he was more encouraging every council to really make a good submission into the review of the methodology. So I believe that every council that was in the room would have been in agreement with the 1%, but I'm not sure who wouldn't be.
Any other comments, councillors?
I guess it's a positive sign that they are talking about an increase to 1%.
It is, councillor. In the lead up to the last election, the respective local government spokespersons for both sides of federal politics sat in the LGAQ boardroom at the same time, and both unilaterally ruled out, in the presence of each other, a rise in facts. So the whole pendulum has now moved considerably from, we are not going to give you anything, no one on either side of politics, well, we've got a commitment from one side of politics to move it. I think it would be slightly disingenuous to think that we're going to get 1% any time in the next 2 or 3 years. I mean, that's a significant jump. But at least if the policy position is to move towards that, that to me wedges the other side of politics, where you've either got to match what they're doing, supersede it, or provide us with an alternative. I think there has been a wholesale change in the position of federal politics around local government in that time, or at least in one element of federal politics. Yeah, I agree. No more comments? Okay, the next item is just advice on foreign arrangements. To the best of my knowledge, officers, we aren't currently engaged in any contracts or binding arrangements with a foreign body that would fall
within the scope of this, what is referred to?
Not that I can find.
So that's good advice. We just now need to keep that on file. We enter into, I guess, if we enter into an arrangement to lease something to a wholly owned or a controlled foreign entity, we'll need to seek clearance with relevant authorities before we do that. But until such time, well, we're safe.
Mr. Mayor, the only thing that I can think of would be the renewable energy zone if there was a foreign corporation involved in that at some time in the future.
And that would be only if they entered into an arrangement directly with either us or a subsidiary of ours. They entered into it with a private individual. Well, that's not our. Okay. The COVID, or any questions on that? The COVID-19 emergency response. This one speaks for itself. This is just an extension of what was granted early last year to allow meetings to continue, given that we're supposed to meet in a public setting. It also provides for councils to move outside the normal budget cycle for the levying of rates and charges. Any questions? The Drought Communities Program extension end date now has been deferred from the 30th of June this year to the 30th of June next year upon application. Do we have a number of projects that this could positively impact, or are all ours scheduled for completion?
The solar project will be impacted
Positively?
obviously.
Yep.
So, even though we have a purchase order for it, it needs extra time.
Councillors, for your benefit, I'm assuming this solar project we're referring to is the solar installation of the board.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a welcome relief from the federal government to take the push back a time frame there, because these 30 June 21 time frames are stacking up all around the place. With your indulgence, I might write to the Minister on behalf of Council thanking the government for that extension of time. Can I have a mover to receive the report 332, the Economic Development Report? Sorry, Councillor. No, that's right, you're right. Councillor Gleeson, seconder. Councillor Hanson. Those in favour? 7-0.
Mystery seconded.
I think Gleeson. No?
Gleeson.
Gleeson Hanson.
Hanson.
Thank you, sorry.
Officers, anything to?
No, just take that through if there's any questions about any item.
Mr. Mayor, the Aunt Emma trial. Can you please explain a little more of that to me?
I'll defer because I can't. It's either the deputy or Rick. Rick's flicking straight back to the deputy CEO.
Mr. Mayor, the state government has funding available for rail trail networks, so old railway lines, and they developed into bikeways or horse trails. So we received close to $100,000 under that program. So it's to do a study whether we can build the rail trail on the old railway line from here to Aramac.
$100,000. I might to keep asking.
No, certainly.
The $100,000 has been allocated by the state government for research,
Yes.
and the
Technical research.
can be conducted by George Wonders GBA,
Yes.
and could you imagine the funding to rebuild that line?
Well, that, Mr Mayor, obviously part of the report is to provide the costings for the project.
So yeah, it's funding, it's not actually costing the council any money.
No.
Thank you.
I feel personally very sorry for the poor team of engineers that's got to bounce over the road runway where they've got to go because there's not much of a roadway.
Through you, Mr Mayor,
Councillor Rogers.
in case anyone was wondering about the progress at the Botanical Garden,
Yes.
they have started to identify the plants in the area, and I think out of the 27 recognised species, they've identified 7. They went out all day doing that mapping, and they've mapped 7, so they've still got some more work to do, but yeah, it's looking very promising.
And that's really positive. Have we had any further developments around identifying the areas on a map that will be required for the Bucky Red, so we can consider the overlay in the future? We've had discussed meetings in the past, the need for state declarations around roads and not a road. Are we progressing with that and its interaction with the Botanical Park?
So we've got 2 of the trails that have been fully mapped and they're available as a layer to go onto Queensland Globe, so we can easily see where they sit compared to anything else. So once we get the Botanical Gardens, we can overlay the 2 and quite easily see if there are any issues there.
Okay. So, and any further progress on or is it we're waiting for all the mapping to be available before we progress a conversation with the Minister's office around declarations of roads or not a road?
Yeah, still working with the lawyers just to make sure that we're asking the right questions of the Minister.
Okay. Very good.
So it's more about asking how the process is, because it's not laid out anywhere.
Very good.
Mr Mayor, the consultants will be getting this weekend to finalise the project side.
So we may see something in the next couple of months.
Yes, we're just finalising our risk assessment as well. We've done a risk assessment internally. We've got hopefully a meeting lined up with the designer to go through with them, and then we need to consult with the other town and users as well.
Through you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
With regards to the drones and aviation, have the schools, has there been a good response from the schools regarding launching the parks?
Jen, do you know anything about that?
No, I don't know nothing about the drone.
We'll have to find out.
Mr Mayor,
Councillor Gleeson?
regarding the rec park, the engagement of the Moore Plains Council engineer, at what cost? At what cost to is that at a cost to us as to the council?
From all of the meetings that I've been to, no. He's doing it pro bono, I thought.
There is some cost.
There you go. That's different. How much?
Is it just like a board and accommodation cost, or is it?
You happen to just be here one day. on his way through to Richmond.
Just while Brett looks that up, through you, Mr Mayor, is it possible to receive that risk assessment on the Barkey Road to all the councillors? Or will we receive it as part of a future meeting?
I'm hoping that it comes with a suite of documents around things like road, not a road, to know whether we're going to, how far we've pursued all of that.
Yep.
Is it?
We can either delay it then, or we can send it out for your feedback as.
Well, if we can get the information as soon as possible, if it's in part or whole, that'd be appreciated.
Brett, did you find that cost?
Yes, Mr Mayor, $2,300.
Thank you. Any other questions on the economic development report?
Mr Mayor, can we have an update on the Globe Tower? I see it's the contractor's handover is 24th of May, so...
Mr Mayor, if we're going to talk about that,
sorry.
What's written there is accurate broadly, I think. The site handover will be Monday. No, sorry, not the 24th. That was 2 days ago.
Yeah,
It was.
It was? It did occur? Okay.
okay, right, thank you. It's right there, sorry. Thank you.
Actually, perhaps now might be.
If we want to discuss it another.
Yes. I will discuss the Globe, if that's okay, because there's
if I can declare a
PCOI. That would be
and
good.
leave it on.
Councillor Arthur declares a PCOI on the basis of
Previously declared
point. Yep. So, officers, would you like to lead discussion on this?
On which
The screen.
To me, Mr Mayor, we met with Brian Hooper, the architect, and 2 representatives from ICM on Monday afternoon, where we have signed the contract. So the contract was signed on Monday. There were discussions around the screen, but the ICM and Brian haven't got back to us with any further information on that. Brett,
Yeah, they did overnight.
oh, did they? Okay.
So, councillors, Mr Mayor, councillors, the contract was signed on Monday with the builder.
You'll refer to your devices. You've just got an email relevant to this issue.
Oh, okay.
So,
then overnight, there's been a further email from the architect with regards to reinstalling the screen as part of the project, using the contingency money for that screen. There's $108,000 in contingency. The screen was $102,000. So the contractors have come back and said that that they were having to take on all 8 site conditions to enable that screen to be put in so they will wear the cost of any variations in relation to the site. The builder will. There wouldn't be any variations that we created. So if we asked for any changes, we would have to pay for those. But if there's changes to do with soil conditions, then they would wear that as part of the project. I've sent you all the email that's come through overnight.
Councillors, we won't be making a decision on this today, however, purely on the basis that you've had absolutely no time whatsoever to consider it. However, should there be an appetite to consider it, then we'll reconvene in an appropriate number of days to give you time to consider it. There is reference in the correspondence that you have that we will need to make the decision within the next fortnight to allow them to order steel, to procure the steel for it. I happened to be at that meeting that Jenny and Brad are referring to, and I did explain the range of positions that decision makers had, concerns about the aesthetic of it not being there, and then also the viewing capacity if it is installed. I also explained that there were comments made by councillors that they wished to see any savings within the project returned, because we had already raided other areas. So I put the full range of issues that we'd obviously taken money from other projects to ensure this one happened. The individual councillors certainly did like the appearance of the screen and would have liked it in there. And then that then generated this response where the contractor is happy to wear it. They don't believe that there's any surprises in store, which is a big risk on their behalf, to be fair. I do take that as a pretty genuine offer, and that sees the screen put back in. There's a photograph attached to that email, which would have been interesting to see actually at the point we were making the decision initially. But it does show that it's not quite the 50 by 50 mil mesh cage that it looks like in the artist's impression from outside, that there is considerable separation between those twigs on the branch on the bird's nest.
Yeah.
Anyway, just your thoughts, councillors. Just to briefly discuss it now. As I said, we won't and can't make a decision today. Or we could if I introduced the mayor a minute, but I don't think it's appropriate. I think you need time to consider it. And if the immediate feeling here today is not to bother, well then I won't necessarily bring you back. But if there's enough of an inclination, well, we'll reconvene within a fortnight to give them. He said a fortnight, so we'll use the fortnight if we need to make a decision.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, being contingency money, if we do agree to put the screen on and then we need that money for something else, there's going to be an issue. Where's the money going to come from anyway?
Well, we would only need it, the way I read it, if we asked for something additional. They're accepting the risk for there being something wrong on site and they aren't ready for it. That statement that they'll accept the latent conditions on site, well, they wear it. They're taking the risk that there is no, or whatever alternative they find will eat into their margin, not ours. But if we ask for something different, then yes, we've got to go and find the money somewhere else.
It's only if we ask for some variation.
Correct. Which we have got more control over than we have an unknown underground or something that we aren't aware of. Councillor Plum?
Yeah, I was one of the advocates that wanted the screen on there, so I'm pretty happy that it's going on there. One looks at this.
No, well, to be fair, it isn't going on unless we resolve to put it on.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, like it's a step in the right direction.
Okay.
For me.
That's all right.
through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't think that we often get an opportunity to, like, that a contractor will take on the risk instead of us. So, yeah, if we can get the screen and there's no risk of us going, having to use the contingency, well then, yeah, I'm probably going to look favourably at that because it'll finish the project. So.
Councillor Gleeson.
Mr. Mayor, the screen, the photo of that, the photo of that screen there is much better than the bird's nest type photo that I saw before. So, and as long as by the look, very briefly looking at that email, they're willing to take on the risk of whatever differences.
Councillor Peoples.
Mr. Mayor, I didn't agree with the screen to start with. A lookout tower, I don't think, a lookout tower, you don't need to have something in your way, in your line of sight, so I disagree with that. Initially, I think it was Councillor Hanson just said, about the contingency. We have contingencies, we always have variances, and I know they're saying that they're going to take the risk, but I'll be surprised if we don't have something here with this one too. There's something we'll have forgotten or the architects have forgotten or we'll probably need some contingency. I very much doubt that we'll go through this whole project and still have that 108,000 sitting there. So, no, I was against it initially and I still am, Mr. Mayor.
My concern probably rests with the process we went to secure the additional Works for Queensland funding, where we had to demonstrate to the state, or certainly when I was talking with the DG, we had to demonstrate that A, we were contributing to it, which we did significantly through the planning costs, and B, that we'd value manage the project down as much as we possibly could. So I'd want to check that we weren't going to disappoint the state if we then go and use the contingency to add. We weren't, to add a project, part of the project that we'd value managed out back in, because it's roughly equal to about 2/3 of the amount that we asked for in additional Works for Queensland funding to go in. Would that be right? 100,000 with 165.
We asked for 165.
This is 108 of it.
The state is aware of the total cost of the project.
They are, but they were.
The contingency.
They are, but they were also quite impressed that we'd undertaken value management to bring the project back as far as we could to meet that initial project budget as well. And I'm also mindful of those projects that we scrapped, that we preliminarily identified. That's very bad grammar. That we identified early for where that 165. We scrapped a number of little projects to ensure that we didn't scrap them, but we didn't proceed with them on the basis that we needed the money here. If that contingency could be returned, well, we could restore some of those projects, not the whole 165, obviously, but certainly a portion of it. Council, I think there's a range of views. I really think time is required. I don't think it would be inappropriate we've got 2 weeks, 10 days. Let me have a further discussion regarding the issue I identified, just to make sure that the state won't be unhappy. Because I think you'd all agree if the state were uncomfortable with us proceeding, we would not proceed. That would be a killer straight away. So let me seek some clarification from the DG around that. And if the advice was negative immediately, well, I'd just advise you and we wouldn't reconvene formally. If, however, they're supportive or ambivalent, then we'll come back and make a formal determination one way or another about the screen being in. But I think it would be premature to try and make a decision today without all of the information for a start, and also given that you have only had this in front of you for the last 10 minutes. We comfortable with that? Councillor Peoples, are you happy with that?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Everybody else is? We'll bring Councillor Arthur back inside then, please. Thank you officers for that. Who had it? Okay, we can move over please to 333. Councillors, there's correspondence to support this. Before I move formally to the repeal, is there any comments? Councillor Peoples.
Mr Mayor, can I just ask for some clarification from our officers here with a repeal of motion? Is there a time frame that you've got to have before you can repeal a motion?
I sought the same clarification, Councillor Peoples.
I can find anything in the Act.
The reference in the Act deals with when you represent a resolution that fails, Councillor Peoples. The ability to repeal, provided the repeal resolution doesn't fail, can be moved effectively at any time. If, however, this repeal resolution fails, it cannot be represented for 3 months. So the only motions that the Act stipulate, to the best of our understanding, that you can't represent are motions that are lost in the net or are lost. I was concerned about that as well, Councillor. I've also checked with our standing orders in case we needed to suspend the standing orders to pass this, which we can do at any time because they're not relevant to the Act, apart from those sections that are. But I find procedurally no reason why this can't proceed, and I have been concerned about it for a number of weeks, and all of our studies show that it's okay, Councillor.
So along those lines, you could repeal a motion at your next meeting?
Correct.
Okay. Yep.
Which, if you were to take, hypothetically, if there was a councillor away and something was resolved 5-2, a councillor comes back to the next meeting and is opposed to it, it's repealed because someone uses a casting vote, for example. So yes, but if that repeal resolution was put at the next meeting and lost, then it could not be represented for 3 months, which is to stop people frivolously, consistently trying to just suspend things to get, when they know that they're not going to get it up.
Yes. Thank you for that.
Does anyone have any discussion around the content? Do I have a mover? Councillor Plum, seconder. Councillor Rogers. Debate? I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Against? 7-0. Councillor Plum, I think you may have the PCOI. Moved Councillor Peoples, seconded Councillor Hanson, that the report be received. Those in favour? 6-0. Comments, questions? Or officers, have we got anything to lead through here? Perhaps it's inappropriate to comment, but I'm going to anyway. I know 2 new dwellings listed in our planning and development report. Would I be correct in assuming they are dwellings on the court, mahogany court? Yeah, it's exciting. It's rewarding to council. That conversations we had about and decisions we made around that land release been followed through now with the first stage of development applications. I think
Mr Mayor, do I have an issue there if you're going to talk
No,
about that?
no, I'm just passing observation around, Councillor. I know you declared the PCOI in the decision phase of that. There's no decision here. I do just point it out because various levels of the state government, lots of other local governments and the odd builder are watching how successful that process is with interest, given the current discussion around housing availability. I've had significant conversations with Winton, the Mayor of Winton, around what we've done in this space, and they're certainly investigating their potential to do the same. It's not a one size fits all approach, but potential for a number of new dwellings to be constructed in a sustainable manner in Barcoolan, I think, is cause for celebration in and of its own, but it could be a game changer across the state, so that's really rewarding to see that at least it's proceeded through to DA phase. Is there anything else?
No, Mr Mayor.
Councillors, do you have any questions around any of the subsequent report pages? Can somebody return Councillor Plum to the room, please?
Mr Mayor?
Sorry, hold up, Councillor, sorry.
That doesn't have anything to do with this. Can I ask a question that is not actually on, it's to do with planning, but it's not actually listed here?
See how you go.
Sorry?
Start. See how you go. If I stop you with drive, you know you can't.
You've knocked me up. It was over a year ago. It was in the planning of a new quarry, proposed new quarry starting in the local area. We've only seen that article once in the planning. We've not seen it anymore.
Was that withdrawn?
Has it been withdrawn?
Well, I don't know. Was it actually lodged, Mr Mayor?
Or was it just inquiry? It was certainly
We
referenced in the
certainly
report.
had preliminary discussions with the applicant. But whether they actually formally lodged an application, I'm not sure.
The fact that we didn't see it in subsequent reports makes me think that they lodged an inquiry but not actually an assessment, because they received, if my memory of this particular development is accurate, they applied for a substantial portion of land, and the assessment fee is worked on a square metre basis, or on an area basis, and they asked for an extremely large portion, so the fees obviously were extremely large. If I'm correct, those proponents met with officers at the time who explained that process, and subsequent to that discussions, I'm not aware of any future approach to council around development of that site. Would that be a fair assessment of what happened? So they lodged an inquiry, obviously got a quote, what it was going to cost. They come and met with council. They didn't meet with me at all, but I happened to be in the building the day they were there, and on my recall of that conversation was a simple explanation of what the process was, and it's correct, which is...
Thank you.
Yeah. There's certainly some potential excitement within the engineering department if that extra quarry had to come on board, because it gave us an alternative source of material, but to date it still hasn't materialised, pardon the pun.
Thank you.
What happened, but I wasn't sick of getting it. Thank you, Councillor Plum. What's the weather like outside?
It's lovely in the sun.
It's lovely in the sun. Beautiful. Can I have somebody move the Community Care Services report, please? Councillor Gleeson, seconder. Councillor Plum. Those in favour? Carried 7-0. Questions, comments?
Mr Mayor.
Councillor Plum.
At some stage, could we please go down and have a look at how it's going? to the
I'm
building?
sorry, I missed that.
Is there any chance of us going down and having a look through the building and see how everything's going?
Definitely. We have to plan at some building as well, so it hasn't occurred yet.
Can we clarify it to be the building?
The new, I'm assuming you mean the new,
Yeah, down at the NDIS where it's down at the HQ.
not where I meant, sorry, I thought you meant the new building at Alpha.
Oh, that as well, but I'm just saying like...
So maybe a tour of both
Yeah.
new operating facilities.
Yeah.
One, we have to physically open our building, and the one that we built ourselves has not yet been opened in Alpha.
Yeah.
There's a situation regarding nursing progress, provision of nursing services.
I'm currently negotiating with Queensland Health for a contract for that service.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr Mayor, is that for nurses, not for AT?
Yeah,
Any news on an AT at all?
separate issue, but good point.
There's no news on OTs. And in speaking with, when I met with the Minister for Disabilities in Longreach, he said that's the #1 issue throughout Queensland.
Yep.
Lack of OTs in terms of disability care.
Was there any potential, I think Councillor Plum, you're recalling conversation at the last meeting regarding the employment by Queensland Health of an OT here. Is there any potential to job share there? Or?
I don't think that's still in place.
Okay.
So through you, Mr Mayor, Brett, you said OT with disability, so they've got to have that extra disability area, or does it come under the HALM or the OT?
Sorry,
If we were
I'm
to
not sure
employ-
what the question is.
If we were to employ an OT, so under there, does the disability area come under that, or is that an extra?
So, yeah, the OT applies to both aged care and disability services, but
Yeah.
I particularly met with the disabilities minister, and he was saying that's an issue for his portfolio, is the lack of OTs.
Yep. Yep.
So he wasn't across aged care, but yeah, they're required across both sectors.
Yep. Mm.
And through you, Mr Mayor, did the Minister have any solutions or workarounds or work forwards, or it's just a known issue?
Just a known issue.
Thought as much. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Further comments? Okay, 2021 project progress report. Councillor Peoples, you've PCI is with respect to the footpath to Paula Street. Is that your sole PCI?
Well, actually, when I found this mayor, I just didn't go any further, so I don't think I see that I need to discuss, I don't think.
Okay, all right. We'll mute our microphone and kill his camera for him if that's possible. Well, that'll do. He can't see. And then now mute. No, we can't mute, can we? We mute our microphone.
No, you do. I'm not using that system.
Okay.
So can I mute here? We do it through Zoom.
Can you still hear me, Gary? Councillor Peoples?
Mr Mayor, did you hear that?
Can you hear me now? Councillor Peoples?
No.
Your horse has no chance of winning.
Maybe just ask
He's moved it. He's moved
I've
it.
muted. Well, he can't be seen.
He can't be. He's gone. Okay, questions? Can we mute his?
We need that. And the
Right.
Gone.
So.
Through you, Mr Mayor. The internal fit out of the Muttaburra Interpretation Centre, is that finished, Paula?
no, it's not.
Yeah, because I noticed this 70. It looked good. I went in there for a look last time I was there.
So they just have to install the steel structures at the back of the dinosaur. They ran out of time to do. We'll go and do this shortly.
Thank you.
On still or within budget? Is that a project that needs completion by 30 June, sorry?
Yes.
Further to that, through you, Mr Mayor, and I appreciate there might be some lag in the costings coming through, but that first page, we're at 56% and we've really only got 6 weeks left in the financial year. We've spent 56% of that allocated budget, and we are. I appreciate there might be even up to a month's lag in some of the costings come through, but it's concerning that we're only at that level at this stage of time. I know we've had a interesting year.
The reseals, Rick, they're scheduled very shortly. Yeah. So that's a significant chunk.
It's not transmitted there.
There's a number of that are zero, like haven't even started yet. Admittedly, they are some of the smaller ones, projects, but
there are, Mr Mayor, so the reseals that's just over $1 million, which has started this week. SCADA and telemetry is deferred till next year. A lot of the sewage treatment plant upgrade has been deferred. So they're substantial amounts of money. They're over $2 million.
Waste landfill Buckballen.
That's deferred as well.
With approval, the state's going to allow the funding to carry over.
Yes.
maybe Mr Mayor, maybe we need to, I don't know, be able to show that somehow, because it doesn't look good from first glance.
If they're deferred.
Well, and the next page.
So they are highlighted in that top colour there where they say.
Councillor Arthur. I highlighted the ones that are deferred.
The cream.
Cream colour.
I didn't see it easily on that either, but in hard copy
Cream.
it's better.
Top of the stamp.
It's sort of like an orange.
Maybe they use a brighter colour.
It definitely looks better on paper.
Yep, sorry, it doesn't jump out. Sorry, my apologies, Mr.
No, Councillor Arthur, it definitely looks better on hard copy than it does on a screen. It's very much white there. That's why officers found it very easy to flick down and tell you which ones were deferred, because it's colour coded for them on their piece of paper. So. Not yours, but you did the colouring, so I hope you can remember them.
still,
That, and that figure's still not represented in the percentage spent or going to be spent. So if you're only reading this, councillor Arthur, that you're right. But the colour is some sort of indication.
That hasn't been replicated in the special operating
No.
projects? Because we're at 40% there.
No, that's or within the plan.
Admittedly, a smaller budget figure. Yep. Okay, thank you. My apologies.
Is there any of that has been deferred though? I think that might be, but at this stage we haven't deferred formally any of those projects out of special operating that aren't written as deferred, so that repairs to old boards have been deferred in Alpha Jericho, and the Economic Development Board was listed as deferred. I think other than that, officers, am I right that there's still an attempt to try and complete the special operating projects in your relevant areas?
Mr Mayor, there are projects on that are complete, costs just haven't come through yet, so the reservoir cleaning's done. So there are projects in there, just waiting on expenditure for.
Is the sewer asset management plan, is it complete or is that still an interim cost? Because it's over budget. That's why I'm asking.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'll get an update of how far through that they are.
Is that for the next phase, so Aramac, or is that for the operating plan for our new treatment facility offtake here?
No, it's all our sewerage assets.
So all three of them,
Yeah,
so
asset
pipes, pumps,
Yes, yeah.
treatment facilities.
And through you, Mr Mayor, when we put that budget together, it was pretty much a guess. Because it hasn't been done for a long time, we didn't really know how much it was going to cost to find every pit, look at every pipe.
So that's a plan for moving forward, as well as a condition assessment, effectively, to know where it's at in its useful life, etc.
Yes.
Okay, very good. That's money well spent. And within plant acquisition, to date, the only substantial overspend are either new assets that have changed. We know that we had the explanation on the message boards last meeting, and then there's realistically only two substantial overspends there, and those assets 6325 and, or actually, sorry, because you're retaining the bottom one. So that's just simply because that vehicle hasn't been sold or traded yet, is that right? There's no sales income attributed to it, so.
that's, Mr. Mayor, I asked a similar question last meeting, and there was some of those vehicles were coming up into auction.
That's right.
Is that true?
Has it happened?
I'm not sure on that one.
Because all the others, there was a number of them last meeting, Council and Police, and that's why I've raised it. They've all pretty well been tidied up now, except that one.
The only one I do know, the Aramac truck, is we registered it last week, so it should be here next week. I said 2 weeks to deliver it. That will clear that major item.
I think our single cab pilots went on NASCO, I think.
Is that 6144?
Yeah.
Yep. Oh. Further questions?
Just one.
Mm.
With the, when we do our budgets and the budget is passed and we okay the purchasing of vehicles, why does it take 8-9 months for it to happen? Why can't things be ordered on the 1st of July, on the 1st of August or 1st of September and just make it all, you know, right, we're going to do this. Whereas we're nearly up to June and we're still vehicles still turning up that we authorised last year. Why is that happening?
Well, there is, Mr Mayor, there is a delay in all plant. Everything that we purchase is major delays. So that truck, for example, has ordered in October. So it's taking a long time. I know there's delays with Toyotas, major delays in delivery of vehicles. Yeah, so yeah, I don't have any other explanation.
Thank you.
Can somebody, we finished? See if we can turn this all back on.
Did someone, did I miss, yeah, did I
Oh.
miss?
Can I have somebody move and second that we receive the project progress report? Councillor Gleeson, seconded Councillor Hanson. In favour? 6-0. See how we go.
Can you hear me, Mr Mayor?
I can. I heard you all the way through, actually. No, I didn't. All right, we have returned to item 344. Can I have somebody move that we receive the report? Sorry, Councillor Plum, seconded Councillor Arthur. Those in favour? Carried. The report is as the report is. We take it as read unless anyone has any questions.
Sorry, my friend's screen's just frozen.
We're away.
Just very slow loads of things.
That happens when we share. Three, 4, 5. I'll just let Debbie do that. That could take a while. May even need resetting. 3, 4, 5. Can I have somebody move, please, that we adopt? Oh, sorry, hang on. Before we call for adoption, Councillors, we had a brief discussion around this that was presented in our format after our recovery committee met last year. However, there was a request from the state to develop a plan or a sub-plan, sorry, for recovery in the template consistent with what QRA are using across the state. That has happened, hence the substantial document that appears in your agenda from page 39 to page 95. I think it's important that we have these recovery sub-plans, but of course we need to also understand the need to be flexible and agile when a disaster occurs, and recovery may take a slightly different format to what's necessarily been articulated in a plan months, weeks, years in advance, decades in some cases. So this is an important first step. It's an important starting point, but it need not articulate the entirety of a local government's response or indeed the community's response to a disaster of any given size. Does anyone have any questions around this plan before we move towards adoption, or any alterations I'd like to suggest?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The only thing I was thinking about, page 20.
Of 56, so page 20 of the actual report.
It's probably not that important, but I think that there is a limited availability of accommodation in actually every town. Not like even in Barclay, there was to be a big influx of volunteers in case of a disaster, but I mean, it probably doesn't make much difference to the report overall. Just says that there's a limited availability of accommodation in Alfred, Jericho, Aramac and Muttaburra, to be aware of that, but there will also is in Barking.
I think that's a relevant point. I mean, you could nearly differentiate and say there's an extreme limited availability of accommodation in the 4 towns listed, and somewhat limited by availability in Barcaldine. I mean, in each of those other towns there is almost a sole provider of accommodation. Here there are a number, but it can be limited at times, like last night, for example.
And in the case of a disaster, like.
But Mr. Mayor, if it was a case of a disaster, you'd start opening up the pavilions, wouldn't you, and start accommodating people with them?
Yes, but they become evacuation centres and articulated as something else. So, like, this is recovery, not disaster management. So you're looking at where you, for external agencies that are coming in to provide support, where would they stay? We would have wound up in most likelihood. Yeah. Although recovery does start the day the disaster starts, I know that, but you wouldn't view pavilions at showgrounds and evacuation centres as a medium-term solution to accommodation, certainly not for support agencies. Councillor Peebles.
Mr. Mayor, also I'd just like to make a couple of points on page 19, if I could, please.
Yes.
Just the community challenges there in Rock Point Tree from distance communities across our region. I think one of our challenges is also the distance we also have to our eastern seaboard and also Brisbane. I think that's a challenge. But I also, Mr. Mayor, think we should just put in there somewhere that the cost of travel, especially air travel at the moment, is a major community challenge too.
You could probably combine the point you're saying there, Councillor Peebles, into a new dot point, the distance between major metropolitan centres and the cost of travelling to those.
Yes. And, you know, if we do have disasters and what have you, you've got the problems with where we've got to fly people out, and I know the health department do help with some of that, and family and friends go to or something. I think the cost of air travel is just way out of control at the moment.
So I'll just made a note here, the distance from major metropolitan centres and the cost of travel to those centres is a further challenge.
Okay.
For a new dot point on community challenges. And we note the addition of Barcaldine on page 20 under considerations for external staff, limited availability. We could just list in all towns perhaps. Can I come in, because I know this effectively has had to be done twice, Brett and whoever else, Jenny, you on that recovery committee, and all DMs, so thank you to all the DMs, because as I said, some would say that most plans don't survive first contact with the enemy, but I think it's important to have a starting point, and this plan provides that. And importantly, like our disaster management plans and the plans we've undertaken, the Central West Resilience Strategy and the Burdekin Horton Flood Resilience Strategy, they provide an important Refidex almost for the state disaster coordinator centres and the relevant external agencies to take something off the shelf when there's a disaster hits Barcoola. What are the implications? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? It provides them an interesting starting point. Local knowledge will always trump when guiding a response at a local level and guiding a disaster at a local level, but the need for external input will be guided by documents such as these. So well done to the officers. Thank you for your hard work in doing this twice and getting it into the template format we see here. Therefore, can I have somebody move the adoption, please, of the recovery subplan? Councillor Gleeson, seconded Councillor Rogers. Those in favour? 7-0.
Mr. Mayor,
Councillor Gleeson.
when that is adopted and well, it has been, will that be downloaded onto our downloaded? And is there also any hard copies of it?
To the hub.
It'll be on our website and in hard copies as well.
Is that a confidential plan? Some disaster management sub-plans are not released publicly because of the style of the information in them. So I just don't. Does this fit that category? But councillors are privy to that information. Certainly you as the Deputy Chair of the Disaster Management Group are certainly, we can, and if any other councillors want a hard copy, I'll give you mine today, but if that's available as for the publication publicly of it, I couldn't state categorically now that it will be.
Thank you.
Yep. It'll be right in saying tradition. Sorry.
We wouldn't be printing copies unless someone requested a copy.
Yeah.
Because the cost of the large number of pages.
70 something pages. Would I be right in saying that traditionally sub-plans are confidential documents, aren't they? It's only the LDMP that is published. This forms a sub-plan underneath our local disaster management plan. So I'd actually be surprised if this is published publicly. This would normally, all of the other plans that sit alongside this are confidential. So until I know otherwise, I would suggest the advice would be don't release it publicly. QRA may decide to release it. Three, 4, 6, the Enterprise Risk Management Framework. Once again, I won't move for adoption. I'll just call for discussion. What officer presented this? Brett, would you like to comment before I ask sort of comp question?
So, Mr. Mayor, this is an existing policy of council. So as part of our review of all our policies, and this is part of our review, regular review of policies. And it's one thing that the auditors have requested that we do review the risk management policy, risk management framework. So basically it's been reviewed. It's essentially the same document with any obvious errors corrected. Some of the terminology, but in terms of council's, the critical thing for council to look at would be on page 9, the consequence matrix. So that's where council decides what is catastrophic, major, down to minor or insignificant. And that's how we assess risk based on those definitions. So in terms of catastrophic, we're saying financial is anything greater than $4 million, so a loss of greater than 4 is catastrophic. Or workplace health and safety would be a fatality, is catastrophic. business continuity if we had a major failure of our essential services like water or sewage. And then going down to insignificant, amount less than $10,000. Issues with the negligible impact to council.
So through you, Mr Mayor, like a cyber attack would be in there?
Yep, so that's under information technology, that column. So if we had widespread long-term loss of our computers, that'd be catastrophic. Down to minor damage.
My only comments, I think it's all broadly good. I note the insertion of the phrase scathing criticism. That's an objective sort of. Is that a loss of state government support, removal of council? It's a scathing criticism, really catastrophic. And its ability to be defined, especially the use of the word scathing. I'm not really sure that that's measurable. What some person defines as scathing and others not. I just don't know what the need for that to be there is. Sorry, Councillor Peoples.
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask in the financial columns, and we've got insignificant and then minor, and you've got an amount between 10,000 and 400,000 minor. Just explain that to me. It's minor. Is it for one project, or what's that 400,000 plan?
Against the whole council. So if there was a loss of item of plant, say that wasn't insured, or there was theft of money that wasn't insured. So a lot of this is, so what would the loss to council be if against the whole council? So the incident is specific, but we're assessing it against the whole council.
Okay, so if we lost something $400,000, we consider that minor?
Well, that's what we're saying here. The council can change that if they don't agree. Because this is what you're setting as the risk parameters for us.
All right, and then, so what do you use this against then? These are the parameters we set for you, Brett. What do you use that 400,000 against?
Well,
we still insure our plant and everything, but it's, $50,000 we add.
Yeah, so when you do your risk assessment of the one we've just done recently is the Barkey Red Park, the trails. So you go through and identify all the risks, and one of those might be financial, and then you say, well, how do we mitigate that? So we could say that we could get sued for an accident, and it'd cost us, it might cost $10 million, but you're insured. But then you mitigate the risk by obtaining insurance, so the risk is reduced to whatever the excess is in the insurance policy.
Mm-hmm. All right, Mr. Mayor, I just think some of those figures might be a little large.
Yeah, I just made some notes here while you've been questioning the Deputy CEO, that perhaps the figures could be amended, that the amount for, say, if we start at the bottom of the table, it becomes 10 to 40,000, for minor. And the amount for moderate becomes 40,000 to 100,000. The amount for major becomes 100 to 500,000. And a catastrophic event would be a loss of anything greater than 500,000.
Yeah.
I've used those figures on the basis of our current financial position. If we were to wake up tomorrow and lose 500,000 as a result of a claim from a lawsuit that we had identified, I would consider we'd have to consider that a catastrophic financial risk. In fact, some could suggest I'm being too not conservative enough. 4 million would wipe us out. We'd be in receivership.
Which lines up with our strategic catastrophic rating as well.
In 2 years, this document could be 500,000 will wipe us out. But we're probably better off reflecting what the reality of the next 2 years, 3 years are.
This document, Mr. Mayor, you're telling us what your risk appetite is by what you put in those columns.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Brett, I take these figures, we've had these have been in here for quite a few years, so I think they're probably reflecting what our cash balance was,
Used to be.
5 or 8 years ago. I agree with Sean, we probably need, and Gary, we need to have a bit of a look at those figures regarding like what our new cash balance is recently.
So the figures again, councillors, especially Councillor Peoples, in case you didn't hear that, the bottom remains the same, insignificant, less than 10,000, although hard to use those two phrases. I don't think anybody in the room or anybody in our council would think that's insignificant, but an amount then of a minor matrix would be 10 to 40,000, a moderate financial loss would be between 40,000 and 100,000, a major amount would be between 100 and 500,000, and a catastrophic amount would be in excess of 500,000.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I agree with those figures.
Councillor Plump?
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Councillor Arthur, have we been hard enough?
Yeah, no, that's right, Mr Mayor, yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Councillor Gleeson? Councillor Peoples?
Thank you.
You just broke up as you finished speaking then, sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. That looks fine.
Through you, Mr Mayor, it's possibly a question or a comment for the next part where we actually have risk. But the framework talks to risk owners, but then the risk register doesn't identify any, from my look at it.
Sorry, can you just lead me to that again?
Like risk owners, so who's responsible for the risk, like what part, whether it's CEO, deputy CEO, engineering, whether it's district manager, health and safety.
Council.
It is more likely a question for the next point, but the framework talks a lot about risk owners. Well, I shouldn't say a lot. Talks to risk owners, but then our next risk register doesn't, to my view, identify risk owners.
Was there a suggestion then?
Well,
How we might do that?
the risk register needs to identify who owns the risk.
So the risk register, right?
Yeah, which is the next item, but
Yep.
it's just a comment to the framework. We've got the framework and then the risk register, but they don't necessarily meet up.
It was clearly mentioned in communication that associated documents such as the risk register are all relevant to this document. So. All right, well, let's just finish dealing with this one. Is there any other points, first of all, on the table on page 9 and then more broadly? Okay, if there's not, can I have a motion to adopt with the amended sections? So can we add a little bit more to that, please, Debbie, that discussed amendments to the enterprise risk management framework, financial columns.
Can
Do you want to actually put the figures in here?
the risk management framework,
It's the consequence matrix, Mr Mayor, is the,
Sorry, yes. I looked the wrong heading up. Actually, we could delete enterprise risk management framework from that. We could just go to the yes, please. Do you want to list what those changes are, or are we comfortable? We verbalise them and record will
should be
show it.
standalone resolutions, so we should list them out.
Okay. So, and then if we close that with a full stop and then go line A or point A.
Dot points.
Sorry, dot point A, I mean, sorry. Minor, 10 to 40,000. Sorry.
You actually have to put it A. You need to list down on these three, not those.
Minor, financial, 10 to 40,000. Oh, sorry, just 10 to 40. Sorry, 10,000 to 40,000 dollars. Correct.
Oh, no, just
the dollar sign.
Yeah.
And K or?
No, all the zeros. B, moderate financial, $40,000 to $100,000. C will be major, 100,000 to 500,000. And D will be catastrophic financial, greater than an amount, sorry, my apologies, an amount greater than 500,000. Okay. Right. Do I have a mover for that resolution as presented? Councillor Rogers, seconded Councillor Arthur. Those in favour? Carried, 7-0. The corporate risk register. Did you want to talk about a point here, Councillor Arthur?
yeah, Mr Mayor, like in our framework, it talks to the risk owner, so who's responsible to manage the risk, to make sure that we're implementing whatever through the risk management process. Mm-hmm. It's just that in that diagram, we've got the risk, possible causes, consequences, existing risk treatment, consequence, likelihood and overall, but no one owns the individual risk.
So officers, recommendation here. Is that information possible to be included for adoption in June, or is it possible to include it today, or?
And the risk register for mine is a bit more of a live document. So with changes, is that going to have to come back to council every time?
Yes, I would imagine we own it, so yes.
This is our high level corporate risk register, so things that are going to stop us achieving our objectives under our corporate plan, for example. And then we will have a number of subsequent risk registers as well that will be more operational as well.
Yep.
They're the more live documents. This particular risk register will generally only get updated through a review process or when something has happened that we need to then think about the impact on our ability to deliver on the corporate plan.
So you believe the ownership column would fit within those plans?
Like for example, the Barkly Red one, we do have a risk owner associated with each identified risk. And it's more related to who's responsible for carrying out the mitigation measures.
The council as a whole, I would see them as being the risk owner. They're the owner of this policy or this register.
Whereas the individual risks that you assess through the framework are designated an individual officer.
Yep.
Does that anyway satisfy the concern? That's all right.
Oh, well, I'm not sure if that translates, or I picked that up through the framework then, but that's all right.
Well, so an example, we can continue the adoption of both of these live documents. Let's have a look when we'll circulate a copy of how something's been progressed, which is, we're going to have a look at this soon. If that still doesn't satisfy, then we can always move to amend, further inclusion of a responsible officer somewhere. I guess otherwise, within the risk register that's in front of you, the additional column added for each, CR1, CR2, who's responsible. Is that where you were thinking?
Yeah. Oh, well, yes, Mr. Mayor.
I guess I can see both sides here. To take an example, for example, of CR3, sudden loss of a major facility, responsible officer could potentially be independent. It could be anyone depending on which facility it was. For example, if it was something in Alpha, it could be District Manager Alpha, or it could be Senior Work Supervisor Alpha, or if it's, whereas some of the other ones, for example, council decisions adversely impacting on council operations, that's pretty easy. That's council.
That's council.
Failures of ICT systems and or loss of electronic data, we've probably got a designated officer somewhere. That one might be relatively simple. It possibly, where I guess the officers are saying here is delineating at this high level document a officer for each designated risk could be we did have to have a number of people in there because there's a number of spots, but failure to do that also probably weakens the document with respect to the framework, so I can see both sides here.
So in this particular case of the corporate risk register, the owner would be council to make sure, and they'd have that responsibility for ensuring that they're comfortable that the organisation is actually delivering upon those mitigation measures.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
then we would then work out how those measures would be incorporated into our operations.
I'm just aware that, especially with risk management, if no one owns it, then it.
On the blame.
Oh, it's not just that. It's not necessarily on people's agendas, but no, that's right.
So, well, I guess that actually probably, that clarification there, casts this with a different light, Councillor. The way I was thinking, if this risk register is owned by us, then
We need to own it.
and we need to question consistently officers on their interpretation and adherence to and provision of information around likelihood of these things occurring or for each. So, councillors, this document probably should become something that sits on the inside of your meeting folder or is saved to your desktop. Pull it out at every opportunity. Assess when we're making an investment decision, perhaps, or a rating decision or a budget decision, what risk that could have. Obviously, not every risk here is going to be factored into every decision, but there should be some.
But it's, as the Deputy CEO spoke to before, that's our risk appetite as a corporate entity.
we have to adopt this today? Is that,
The corporate risk register, this already exists.
this, I just wonder if,
You are reviewing it.
I just wonder if now, in light of what the advice or the explanation, I just wonder if we might spend a little bit more time, council, workshopping whether we agree with things such as the consequence, the likelihood and the overall risk rating when assessed through that framework, because we haven't, as council, subjected any of these identified risks to our assessment within that framework. We're relying on others. I think we might set this to one side with your indulgence and have the opportunity to thoroughly investigate each one of these, because it's not officers, it's us. So there's been an interpretation done by a previous council or previous workshop. This council hasn't workshopped this risk. I'd feel more comfortable if we held this for another month.
Yep.
Thank you. Item 3.5. We will move to defer consideration until the June meeting. Councillor Peoples moves, seconded. Councillor Rogers. Those in favour? Carried 7-0. Three, 5-1. Can I have somebody move the financial report be received, please? Councillor Arthur, seconded. Councillor Gleeson. Those in favour? Carried. So, flood damage removed. Our cash position is in the order of 4,600,000. With about 1.2 million owing. Recoverable anyway. Any further questions? Will somebody move the works report be received? 361. Councillor Plum, seconded. Councillor Hanson. Those in favour? Carried. Rick, have you got anything for us?
Through Mr Mayor, we've had fine weather for the last number of weeks, which has been a help to get some projects done. The flood damage reconstruction works has basically halted over the last few months due to the 2021 event, which has caused us to do emergency works throughout the council area. So that's made our balance sheet worse, obviously, because we've got about close to $2 million there we need to recover back from QRA for emergent works.
21 emergent works.
That's right, which won't be claimed until next financial year. But the construction projects, TMR works are going very well. We've had to accelerate one of the projects on the Bark Yarramak Road, so that we've joined the Yarramak and Bark Hall crews together to do that, which needs to be done by the end of financial year. The construction job on the Clermont Alpha Road is going well as well. They're clear sailing with a bit of fine weather.
So there'd also be an element of needing to pause your 1920 reconstruction works just to take stock of the crossover effect? Would that be fair? Like where 21 impacts have compounded on both 19 and also 20 events?
Yes, Mr Mayor, so that's going through a process now which takes a number of months to line up the 19, 20 and 21 events and see what the impact is. And we'll combine those and go forth with some sort of program of reconstruction.
Unfair question without notice, Rick, but is there an element of any of the work that we've already reconstructed that has been subsequently re-damaged, or there is a bit of that as well?
Definitely.
Are we exposed there, or is our reporting procedures on the work that we've completed tidied up and good?
No, reasonably exposure is limited, so you tidy up quite a bit of it through the emergent works period, back to where we are.
I guess I'd probably been more sorry, Rick, I interrupted you there. A number of years ago, we didn't have very good procedures around closing out jobs, and there'd be rain 2 days after we'd finished the reconstruction. We wouldn't have taken our photos and so forth. And we were left exposed to have to go and redo that. That's good.
Definitely a risk. We've tidied that process up fairly well, so as soon as a contract is finished somewhere or a section is finished, we'll get out and do the post repair photos. So our exposure that way is a lot more limited than what it used to be.
And a number of the contracts we've awarded have been full supervision contracts, is that correct? Not a number, but some of, for example, the northern Jericho areas.
Yes.
Does that also further limit our exposure because it's incumbent on the contractor to undertake those photos and post-closure reports?
No, we'll still do the
We still do
post-closure
that.
reports.
Okay.
We maintain that.
Right, very good. So are you not envisaging the release of too many more packages till we clarify the extent of the 21 event?
We're looking at the impact that the 21 events had on our program, given that we've had 3 months where we've pretty much stalled it with our own crews and a number of other crews. So as soon as we take stock of where that's at, so we'll be releasing more packages.
Okay. Sorry, councillors. Anyone else?
Mr Mayor, through you, Mr Mayor, what's construction delayed due to accelerated safety projects? Is that just safety that's detours?
Through you, Mr Mayor, the federal government safety stimulus package, so one of the projects on the Barkey Aramac Road, which Barcoola crew is constructing, that's tranche one of those safety projects. The one that Aramac was constructing is a completely separate bucket of money, which doesn't have deadlines at the end of June. So due to the rain we had February, March, April, it delayed that project through wet weather. But wet weather's not an excuse not to finish those projects. So we've had to down tools on the Aramac job, bring them over to the Barkey job and accelerate those works to get done by the end of June.
The phrase safety is not actually respect to work safety, or it's the federal government titled that funding bucket a road safety program. So it had to be not just, you had to be able to, the state had to identify works that were identified at upgrading road safety, not necessarily just like nice things. Is that right, Rick?
Yes, that's correct. And you have to complete the tranche one projects by the 30th of June to receive the tranche two project funding, and so on after that, complete tranche two by the given deadlines to get tranche three. So finishing this project has obviously flow-on effects in funding coming to us if we don't get it done.
If you look at the two projects that we have from tranche one of this safety funding, we're looking at road widening, which obviously enhances road safety, and a rest area, which fits with the safety for heavy vehicle operators, compliance with logbooks and fatigue laws. Is that right, Rick? So we don't get specified that these are state conversations. We're just constructing on the state's behalf the projects that they deem to be of safe.
Yes.
Whereas the ceiling of Clement Alpha is not a federal safety project. Where is the Capricorn Highway is not either from memory. It's a separate bucket. Again, it was a COVID road stimulus funding. All with similar spend times, but different buckets of money. The key point that Rick made before, that the tranche of this safety funding is critical, because you won't get a go at stage 2 or tranche 2 if you haven't completed tranche 1 in time. That money will be deferred elsewhere. They've been unequivocally clear of that since before those projects were identified. The Director General of Main Roads spoke very clearly to the Outback Regional Roads Group in November of last year, and departmental officers had provided our officers the same advice. We were told to gear up, get ready, basically stop doing anything else, because if you don't do that work, you will lose the opportunity to do future works, which effectively our officers took very seriously and have done.
So while that is happening, the flood damage, the flood damage money it can carry on. It will.
Yes. Not indefinitely though.
Not indefinitely.
It has.
2019 is 2 years old. So how much older than that go?
So we got a 12-month extension on that, so it's June 22 for completion, and so is the 2020 flood damage at this stage, June 22.
That is of a concern, that the 20 event coincides with the completion of the 19 event. So we're seeking an extension.
We have sought an extension. We haven't received that response yet.
And I'm sure that you just answered the question a moment ago, but the contractors that are already out there, you said we as in engineers, or we as in the work supervisors to tidy that, to sign that job, or
yeah, we as in council. So
we as in council.
It's either my team or it's contracted to GBA to go and gather that data
After the job's complete.
after the job's complete.
Although it's not only after, is it, Rick? You've had a number of jobs that have been, checked periodically at start-up and during that. So they've been monitored as the work has unfolded too.
Thank you.
Councillor Hanson, any questions for Rick? Arthur?
No, I'm thanks.
Fine.
I'm good with me.
381. Have I skipped something? Is that right? Comments, thoughts, questions? Before we formally adopt something? Has anybody got a comment, or are we resolving this, or? Councillor Gleeson, comment?
Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure what to say, but we've been helping our committees. Sometimes I'm in favour, sometimes I'm not. I personally believe that the council should be helping committees through assistance with machinery or water or power bills or whatever, not necessarily finance, but there has been quite a few committees this year that we have helped financially. Thank you.
Just a comment about in-kind support. I'd imagine just right now, Rick, finding equipment spare to help in kind would be a challenge.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, you'd have to do it on other days.
Finding gear that's not Councillor Feeble.
Mr Mayor, I give my support to sponsoring for $1,000. I think that we spoke about this during a previous budget meeting, how we had, I think, $60,000 in there. A lot of that was going to the Tree of Knowledge Festival. I know we spoke about we have to shift that about and try and get some of that back too, but I know we've just supported the Tree of Knowledge Festival. I think we paid for the fireworks. I don't know what else at that festival. But we did discuss on the day that some of these clubs are going to need help, and especially with security, to try and help them through some of the issues they're having now and the costs they're having to put on their events. So I'm happy to council to be a sponsor for a team draft in Melbourne.
I'm aware that security has been a cost in Munnabara for their events recently, so that, not that it's specifically asked for here, but I'll be surprised if it's not a common cost. Councillor Plum, did you ask? Did you move something? No.
Just blew my nose.
Councillor Wood?
I think that in this case, with the being very difficult with the in-kind, like with our machinery all busy, it's probably the easier option is to sponsor for $1,000. And I do think that there are a lot of committees that do need a little bit of assistance from us, but like we were discussing, having a little bit of a look at the policy, our policy for donating money to clubs, and I guess the sooner we do that, the better, because we've got a lot of clubs asking for money and assistance, and there has to be a fair way to distribute that sponsorship, I think, across the board. No comments.
Yeah, right. We need to review it. We haven't yet, but do we make policy on the run today, or do we? Yeah, sorry, Councillor Gleeson.
Mr Mayor, it is in this financial year.
Well, technically, is it?
No.
September 21.
No, it'll be next year. The request's now for their event planning, I'd imagine, but it's not till actually next financial year.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was going to say there has been money allocated for sporting events in this financial year, but this is next financial year, isn't it?
Yes.
I will support it, but I'll just
If it was to come out of this year's budget, is there still money left in the community support fund that hasn't been expended? So it's not over-expended, so it could come from this year if it was someone cut the cheque before the 30th of June, it affects this year's budget, not next year's, so if we don't.
I thought there was money allocated. There is money allocated for those sort of things.
Correct. I'll be right in saying this event, sorry Councillor Rogers, did this event run last year? Last calendar year? It did not do it. Oh. Sorry, we couldn't run, yeah.
Mr Mayor, I was just going to say, even though the event is next year, is there a possibility that they could invoice us for that amount before the end of the financial year, so that it wouldn't affect next year's budget?
Is there a problem with that? I'll just say there's no problem with that. All right, where are we at? Councillor Peoples, I believe you've moved the resolution.
I'll move the resolution, Mr Mayor.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Arthur, will there be anyone wishing to speak against the resolution? Those in favour? Carried. 7-0. (3H2) land lease Munnabara. Report here. Looking to lease the area identified in the corner of the lot 554 309924. Any problems here, Paul, or anything to report? Any issues from a...
Not that I'm aware of, Mr Mayor, so our solicitors draw off the lease agreement, so they'll explain everything.
Mr Mayor, this is the land that we've asked to freehold as part of the resources freehold, so.
Yep.
It will be a trustee lease, some of that free.
Right, and at which point then we could sell that land to a proponent, should we wish. Right, happy to move this, somebody? Councillor Hanson, is that? Yep, Councillor Gleeson seconds. Debate against? There being none, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Carried 7-0. Grant concession of 50% water utility charge from 1 July. The property at 74 Ash Street, and we'll leave the service charges for the remainder of that premises as they are. Any objection? There being none, I will move that, please. Seconder, Councillor Plum. Those in favour? Carried. 7-0. One application. Councillor Rogers, anything to speak to there for the Mosaic Workshop with Margaret Stevenson?
Through you, Mr Mayor. It's pretty straightforward. Margaret Stevenson was very well welcomed here for her last project with the Catholic school, and I think it's probably where people in the community thought that they'd like to have her back, or more of a community, another project. So.
Did Margaret undertake the workshop in Alpha that they've used to decorate the street, main street tables? Was that not, there was another mosaic?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I think that was another artist.
That's fine. Just curious. We got a problem here, office councillors, with this? Can I have somebody move? Councillor Plum, and at second, Councillor Rogers. Those in favour? 7-0. Councillors, here you're asked to amend the resolution moving the Gardening Expo in Muttaburra to 22 because of the regional event being held on this significant regional event, Westec, being held here in September 21. This has come after significant consultation by the district manager, and that community asking for it to be postponed to allow a bit of clear air, I'm assuming. That's right. Nothing further to add to your report?
No, there's, they have a number of functions going on this year, so they're happy to deal with Westec again.
Okay. Any further discussion, councillors? Can I have somebody move that we agree to amend? Councillor Gleeson, seconded Councillor Arthur. Is it that we agree to amend, or that council amends resolution? We can probably take agrees out.
Just council amends.
Probably just drop the 2 as well. Those in favour? Carried. 7-0. 10:17 in the morning. We've just concluded our general meeting. Well done. Even though we did start an hour early, that's still